All right, you're listening to Being Built. I'm Aaron Davis, the host, founder of Reliant Search Group. I'm here with Laurence Jones, otherwise known as LJ. Appreciate you being here. And you're one of the founders of RiskVersity, right?
I am, yes.
Cool. Appreciate you being here, man.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're a co-founder, right?
Correct.
Okay, so you got a partner that started the firm with you?
Correct. So it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Is it?
Yeah. So with my still continuing partner, Chris Holmes, his background was in the industry. So we had kind of the idea.
Okay.
And then we went out searching for a broker partner. And so then our other co-founders were a part of a different insurance agency when we started RiskVersity. So that's how it was complicated. But we since then bought them out, and then we just focus on the consulting side. So that's why it's a little bit complicated. But yeah, Chris and I are still in the business, and then we have one of our other longtime friends, J.R. Foster, who has a small equity piece, but he's just kind of around, right? We're good friends, and we try to share and do work together. So it gives a little bit of incentive to push things our way when appropriate.
I'm tinkering with a vision to kind of build a partnership and kind of share some equity in the firm or whatever with a couple of my key early contributors. And I got to figure out how to do all that.
It's a process.
It is. I got to change the business entity, and I got to figure out the formulas and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
It's kind of front of mind to me, actually. Maybe you can tell me how to do it.
Happy to have a conversation. It's a part of there's no reason to start, from square one if you can just ask questions to people who've been through that process, right? But it's like a marriage, right? You have to understand you guys are thinking the same way, not in terms that you can't bring your own, visions to the table, but at least you agree on the fundamental stuff. Otherwise, you'll be trying to figure out how to get out of it, down the road.
I guess it's not unlike critical hiring, which I do. I do a lot of executive search kind of stuff and most critical hiring. And in those situations, people care very much about what are your driving principles, right? Like the talent, the employee. You're bringing in a new executive or whatever, they're going to drive a lot of the direction of your organization. Absolutely. You want to know that they're kind of driven by the same, like, this is important to me in building a customer, base and building a team and whatever else. It's not unlike that, I guess, just more committed. More committed.
Yes, absolutely.
You can't be like 2 years in like,
Right. I mean, you could.
It's just complex, right?
It's just more complex.
Right.
Getting out of it, it's not unlike.
It's like a marriage.
It's like a marriage.
Yeah. Interesting.
Who wants the big monitor? Right.
Yeah.
And the great microphones.
Who gets the house? Yeah. You like the monitors too?
Yeah. Those are nice. Good size.
Yeah, I barely sit back there, actually. I do most of my work on my phone. It's funny. So tell me a little bit about what you guys do. Can we talk about your business?
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm curious. I'm more curious about you, to be honest, but I want to hear about your business first.
I mean, you kind of morph into a little bit of that, right? So a lot of times your business, when you're an entrepreneur, your business sometimes takes a part of your life, as well. So I think when you're working for a corporation, it might be different. But as an entrepreneur, I think you kind of infuse some of that because you spend so much of your time, doing the work. So don't be alarmed by my shirt that says CyberSure on it. You might have looked at it already, but RiskVersity, as I communicated, was really first started to be an insurance agency.
Okay.
And what we had found, my partner and I, we saw that we were doing some consulting, and the accountant in me thought, well, if we're doing consulting and we're finding gaps in insurance coverages, and our clients would say, well, can you place this coverage? And our response was, no, we can't. Well, I'm like doing math. And I'm like, we pass up a lot of revenue by not being an insurance agency. So what we did was took our consulting business and then found a larger entity partner that can do a lot of the back office stuff to create the agency. What we realized is that being a diverse owned, minority owned organization, being small, being new, you kind of had three strikes against you, come and do a conversation about, let us do your insurance work. So they say, well, how long have you been around? Not very long. How many people do you have? Not very many, right? So you can feel the pressure coming. And so we did that for about 3 years, from 2015 to 2018, and realized that if you're in consulting, people care less about how long you've been around. They'll ask the question, but it's not to validate you. It's just more to understand. It's
more about the whole resume.
Yeah, exactly.
What have you done altogether in your life?
100%, right? And so if your expertise and the value that you can bring is there, they like you and want to work with you as an individual or an organization, right? That likability component. and you can solve their problem, the price is right,
Mhm.
you're probably going to be doing some work, right? And so an insurance agency, they want to have redundancy. Whenever people call into the issue, they understand you have, if you're out, that there's all these other folks who can be there. On a consulting, there's also so many single,
it's about the mind you hire, right?
Absolutely, right? And so we saw that opportunity to really focus on the consulting side, but still being really closely related to the insurance industry, but really focusing really on that risk management part. So when folks think about managing risk, the average person says, well, I have insurance for that. That's not always true. COVID really opened the eyes to a lot of people, that even large corporations who felt like I have insurance for about everything I can imagine. Well, COVID, the insurance carriers like, we're not covering that. That claim's denied. And there's pretty large claims. And so that really tells you that's a risk management component, right? What are those things that are either uninsurable or difficult to insure? What are you doing from a risk perspective, right? So redundancy, being able to work remotely, right? When you couldn't come in because you couldn't be, well, we're 6 feet apart now. I think closely, if you lay down, you could probably figure it out. That business continuity plan would come into play. That's risk mitigation, right? So how do you, in a pandemic, when you can't be around each other, how do you continue working? Well, you go at home and do it, right? In your safe bubble, if you will. But there were so many companies, even in 2020, that were on desktop still. Not easy to pick the desktop up and take it to someone's home and then plug in and work. And so there were organizations. You probably didn't ask me all this, but I'm telling you anyway.
It's all great content.
It's all great content, right? There you go. That had to go to Best Buy or Staples to buy an off-the-shelf computer that probably didn't meet the security requirements that they would normally have on premise.
Interesting.
Right? And so now you understand that I'm getting to the point of why cyber issues were exacerbated during COVID, particularly in that first, the first couple of months, and actually the first year of COVID, because you had machines connected to networks without the appropriate software to mitigate the risk and the endpoint detection and response on those machines. And that created all these cyber events. You had people who no longer were able to stand up in there, we call prairie dogging, in the queue. Hey, you get a weird email that came in? It looks kind of funny, right? Okay. Well, when you're at home by yourself, you're going to ask the wall, you're going to ask your dog.
You're less inclined to do that on chat than you would be the prairie dogging or whatever.
Exactly, right? It's just another more
Or you're not accustomed to it, so that habit's not there. The habit's not there. You're new to that context of working.
Cyber claims were, off the charts, right? So COVID really helped educate people on why managing risk was just as important of thinking about insurance. So when we tell our clients or prospects, insurance is a component of managing your risk, right? So that when you're looking at that, it's like, well,
what are the big components?
Most folks are going to cover their property.
Okay.
Right. So you're gonna cover the building and the contents, the assets, your computers, and those types of things. You're gonna cover things for HR, right? Employment practices, right? Because people do dumb things at work, and then management has to make decisions, right? And sometimes the decisions aren't always. I won't use the word appropriate. Sometimes they're not appropriate, but
legal.
They don't, legal. They don't follow the right process to terminate someone, and based on their race, age, gender, that can make it more complex. It could be if they have a union or not a union. All those things come into play, and so having that insurance in place is key there. For professional liability, meaning your errors and omissions, right? Your work product. You want to have insurance for that in the case you mess up. That if someone sues you because you didn't do a good job or communicate or didn't deliver on what you said, they sue you. You have insurance to to deal with that. So. I mean, we can go on for days about coverage, and we don't want to bore people with that. But there's things that like a COVID, for example. There are some warranty things that manufacturers might want to put into place. Not all insurance carriers want to put an insurance policy out there. So you may have a captive created that is your own insurance company to then put that exposure inside of. So there's a lot of things you can think about strategy wise to manage how you're going to deal with risk both internally and externally.
Are you afraid of spiders?
I'm not afraid of spiders.
Do you just live in fear of it?
Do you see one?
No.
I'm not afraid of them.
You don't look like a wimpy, scared kind of person, but
I don't like sharks.
You don't like sharks.
I don't like sharks.
Oh, you need to stay out of Hugo's way then. He's a big fan. I'm joking, but my real question you spend a lot of time talking about legitimate fears that folks should have in business. Like, what does that do to you?
It makes you conscious, right? More often than not, but you still have to live, right? I mean, it's, you don't pause your life. I'm not like, I wouldn't say I have OCD or nothing about things that way. And that's okay if you have OCD. You know, I'm not trying to create a situation, but, you know, I'm a motorcycle rider, right? So if you're thinking about managing risk, riding a motorcycle is not safe, right? But it's a calculated risk for me. I enjoy how it makes me feel to, you know, be in the wind.
You've done the math, and it's worth it, right?
Right. And I have life insurance, right? You know, that has to be in place. And the wife's like, did you pay it? Like, it's paid on time, right? So in the event something catastrophic happens, I have disability coverage in the event that I can't show up and go to work, that, you know, we still have income coming in, right? So you're managing risk, right? So I'm doing something that has a higher likelihood for death or severe injury, but I wear a helmet, you know, I wear long pants and I wear the appropriate shoes. I normally have on long sleeves and gloves to minimize the, you know, in the event something happens, there's lots of variables that hopefully I can survive.
Yeah.
Now, my arm might be backwards.
Right.
And,
Man,
you know,
I saw my son and I actually, my middle son and I saw a really bad motorcycle wreck up in the mountains out near Denver. And we were there on just a goofing around trip, you know, playing disc golf and hiking, whatever. And just pulled up, and we were like the second people on this scene of this accident. And it was gross. It made me, we saw it anyway. I won't describe it because that's not the kind of content we're creating, but it was an ugly scene. And I was like in the market to buy a bike, and I don't think I'm going to now. Because it messed with me, you know what I mean? And I think it would make me more nervous. You know what I mean? That's why I asked the question. Like, if you've seen every situation, you've probably seen businesses go under, you've seen big losses, people lose their job, criminal stuff, whatever. And then
life goes on, right? Yeah. And so, you know, I won't skydive because I can't accept the risk that my parachute won't open.
Yeah.
You know, there's a backup chute. I feel like, well, somebody didn't do their job, so that's not going to open either. And then the ground's coming at me really, really fast. I'm going to be splat. I just can't accept that.
Yeah.
For risk. But motorcycle riding is a different story for me.
Feel more in control or something.
I feel more in control, but having that fear factor, I think, allows you to be more defensive driver. So you're managing risk from that perspective.
True.
I like to ask, when there's an accident that happens, like, what went down?
Yeah.
Right? Because if you find out that it was speed related, that someone was doing 100 and a 25, like, okay, like, I can see the result of that carelessness, right? If someone just pulled out in front of them, like, that maybe wasn't the rider's fault, that was the driver. And so you think about those ones, you're sitting at a stoplight and somebody comes behind you. So we do a thing, and it's my month to create it. It's called Everyday Risk Management.
Okay.
So we're trying to create everyday content, just kind of be somewhat, you know, lighthearted, but also tying in how every single day you're managing risk of some sort. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do for this month's. I
like that. I like that wearing your helmet.
Everyday risk management. Yeah, but, you know, I got an intercom and I do phone calls and I do conference calls while I'm riding on long trips.
Interesting.
But I did get slightly distracted when you asked me about RiskVersity. So again, COVID created the opportunity to educate people, to help us with our sales cycle.
Okay.
But what we do is it's really three components, right? It's enterprise risk management. What that means is looking at holistically the risk profile of the organization. Right? What are those things that can impact you from achieving your goals, missions, and vision, right? So kind of that, what's going to hinder you from achieving what you set out to do, but also those hazard things, right? Those financial risks, right? All that together, identifying, you know, in your industry, but uniquely to your business, what are those items? And then after you have that kind of listed out, then you're asking those questions about, is it insurable? Is it not insurable? Is it, you know, easy to insure? Is it cost effective or not? And then what do we do about that risk, right? Are we going to transfer that by buying the insurance? Are we going to retain it and hold it all in? We're not going to buy insurance for it. Can we have a third party, you know, do that? So for example, there was a client who, you know, painted stuff.
Okay.
And the process had a lot of a risk in doing it, and it wasn't very valuable to them to do that process. So the conversation was, does it make sense for us? We can't keep people who want to do this work.
Okay.
With OSHA requirements, EPA requirements, all the regulation around being able to paint indoors and have a paint booth and all those things.
Too expensive,
Too
not
expensive,
worth it.
right? It's not worth it. The risk, the cost benefit isn't there. How about we go find a third party? All they do is paint. They'll paint anything.
Yeah.
Chair,
and you're competing against them. So like, why do it?
Why do it?
Yeah.
Let them do it. They have a process for it. They have the workforce for it. They can do all the EPA stuff and all. And then you just send your doors there to get painted, and then you bring them back into your process and do what you need to do with them, right? So having those strategic conversations is what enterprise risk management is about. Then we have our other pillar, which is employment risk services. So think more HR consulting, if you will.
Yeah.
But it's not to focus on your day-to-day activity per se. It's really trying to understand, are you in compliance? We look at the trends from insurance claims, then communicate that to our clients to say, what are you doing to keep yourself out of hot water, basically, right? So we're doing HR department audits. We're reviewing handbooks, right?
Policy, procedure, training,
procedures,
that kind of stuff.
training. What does your recruiting process look like? What is your, what's the turnover look like? Are you diving into, issues with supervisors because you see one department has a high turnover? Do you look into that to figure out, is this something that is a legal issue, or just the supervisor is not a good leader and they're a good person, a good employee, so maybe they need training, right? So helping the organization really dive into those employment related things, because your people and your technology are your biggest risk. What do
you see as the most common employment or employee risk? What's the most obvious thing that employers are doing wrong?
Wrongful termination, right? And then outside is retaliation, right? So those two things we see a lot of. And if you want to sprinkle in something around, an inclusive work environment and equity and diversity, and it's like tie those things together. That's what happens. And then harassment was a thing a while, maybe 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. The Me Too movement that was there, that's died down a bit.
Yeah, not that it's not still important. It's just a focus on it or the attention on it, right? Yeah, I just talked to an HR leader today. She was a CHRO for a fairly large organization, and they had some downsizing or whatever. She lost her job. There was a consolidation, and so she's networking, trying to find work. And she talked to a CEO she knew because she knew about a CHRO leaving. Like, hey, I'd be interested in this. This could be interesting to me. We're not going to backfill that. And so her theory, she was literally just describing to me that this, like the popularity and the attention and the effort and the time and work that's been put into DEI work has diluted the CEO perception of what the CHROs do, about what HR departments do. And I hadn't heard that before, so I didn't respond. I was a little taken aback at that. Right. So what you're saying, so what she was saying to me, I think, was CEOs have less demand and interest in employing and investing in their personnel departments because they see it as non-value add stuff. And that goes back to the same question that we were asking and talking about however long time ago when we started this DEI investment. Like what's the impact to the business, right? And risk, so in addressing the risk, you certainly are talking about one aspect or one measurement of its value. What's your take on that?
Like you, that's surprising.
First time you've heard that perspective?
Yes.
I was surprised to hear that from a
Completely
female
surprised,
HR executive.
By that, because what we continue to hear is that workforce is still a challenge. And so if you don't have HR, then you really can't figure out your workforce, and culture is a part of that, right? So that's surprising to hear. And it might be industry based. Maybe I don't know enough details to understand that one, where they don't have problem getting people to show up and want to work in a cool.
Who knows?
But if they're downsizing or consolidating, that doesn't sound like that's the case. So yeah, it's really surprising because when we look at a risk register through our process, workforce and talent is high in that list in the top 5.
Keeping them engaged.
And
keeping them productive.
That is very much so a HR function. That's very much so what a CHRO would be focused on, a strategy perspective, to make sure that we have the right culture, we have the right engagement with our employees, we have the right, we are recruiting appropriately to bring in the right mix of people that will blend in or change our culture if that's the desire.
Shape our
right?
culture the way we want it to be.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that is surprising. The only thing I can think of is there are some leaders who just don't value
Right.
HR.
Right.
And that feels more like that scenario where that leader just doesn't see the value in having that type of role. Period. So
that's right.
Yeah, that's
yeah. Sorry to make you speculate on a character that neither of us know.
No, but I mean, it's something that we, hearing you say that, I'm going to take that back, to the team as we're looking at, HR things to understand it. Is there devaluing in?
I think we need to continue to, because I work in an adjacent space. We need to continue to articulate the real bottom line impact of the differentiated value of personnel decisions. Right. You're always having to. I have to do it in a different context, but that is the thing that makes the bottom line happen, right? Yes, it's the technology too, it's the products too, but right. I mean, the people are the biggest variable.
The people are the variable.
Yeah, thanks for indulging that.
No, you're welcome. And so the last point I was going to make on what we do is our enterprise risk management, the human capital component, and then cyber.
Okay.
So
that's what I heard you speaking on. That's why I was impressed with your presentation, actually.
So what RiskVersity, right before COVID, one of my good friends who well-versed and, had spent time in the government with, clearance to do things that he couldn't really tell me about, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, I'll have to kill you kind of stuff, that kind of thing, right? He was doing a process with technology to help quantify the exposure of a company or organization.
Okay.
And me thinking like, you're on to something here. Mm-hmm. He's a techie guy, right? He has a vision like, but I can take this and strategize and make this the product and sell it and integrate it, into other things. And so when we were in the insurance business, what he would do for our clients on the cyber side, because cyber was still new at the time, cyber liability insurance, coverage, he would, do a process to look at how their risk profile on the cyber side. Then that data allowed me and our team to say to our client, you need $2 million of cyber coverage. But in doing that, your security best practices are way out of alignment. Like you're doing one of the 10 best practices.
Wow.
How do we help you check off more of these so that you are better protecting yourself, right? So
does that? I'm assuming that affects insurance rates too when they can see that kind of stuff, right?
It does, right? So they're asking the application, asks for what are you doing in a variety of different ways? Are you doing backups? Do you use multi-factor authentication? Are you training your people? Are you doing patch management? Do you manage your vendors that connect to your network and you're sharing data? Like the answers to those questions impacts whether one, they'll offer you insurance or not. But then to your point too, how much will they charge you for? What does your risk profile look like?
Just like, workers' comp or whatever. Are you climbing up ladders or are you hitting keyboards, right?
I try to relate that back to people, things they understand, right? So it's work comp, it's home, your auto, right? So you think about today's conversation with a prospect around cyber. It's no different than you have a building. You insure this building for what the value of this building is, or the cost to replace it. And there's been a long-standing process to understand what that is, right? There's an appraisal.
True.
Right? There's a market value for that. And your insurance carrier will tell you that your building is $2 million, but in today's economic times, the replace is going to be $3 million.
Okay.
So you have to make a decision. Do I insure for that full $3 million? And most people will do that without batting an eye. Give me the $3 million. Right? What's it cost me? Okay, I'm gonna swallow that. I don't like it, but I'm gonna do it because if the building burns down or if a tornado comes, I want to be able to file a claim
and be back in business.
Back in business, right? And so in a building, you have security, you have an alarm system, right? You have
fire alarm,
you have sprinklers, right? All those things go in to minimize the catastrophic scenario. So in cyber, we're doing the same thing with various technologies and tools and processes and procedures much like sprinklers and, alarm locks and doors and all that kind of thing and access control, right? So, my key fob, they know
identifies entry.
LJ came in the building at 6:41 a.m.
Interesting.
And I left. They don't always know when I leave, but I was in the building. So if something happened in a window, they can go to the scan in and go, who was here?
Same thing with cyber, like credentialed entry and
credential entry, those types of things, right? This logging is what happens with on the cyber side. So what we've done with that process is we built out RiskVersity built out a cyber risk practice. Fast forward about 6 months, we saw the pandemic comes into play, and we said we need to really focus on something cyber only. So RiskVersity tells you risk, doesn't tell you cyber risk, right? And so we went out and had some conversation with people, and one of those folks were Brixey & the firm that I worked at for 11 years, right? Okay. And I talked to Doug Meyer and said, RiskVersity could provide cyber risk services for your clients, and it could be a value add for your prospects and your sales pitch. And Doug Meyer goes, let's go big or go home. And so through that conversation, the partnership was created.
Okay.
To figure out, can we be married in this business venture, right? And go through all that process, business plan. And CyberShore was created to focus purely on cyber risk, because that was such a big conversation for every type of organization, both for profit and not for profit. When cyber's in your name, at least you know what kind of lens you're in. And so the shore part of CyberShore is assurance and insurance, right? So that was kind of that shore part of there. So we got creative. So you have accountants in a room with technology folks trying to get creative. That was the best we could do, right? So it's colors and logo. And so our logo, I don't know if you can see that on here, it's a C and a S, but it creates a chain. Okay. You're only as strong as your weakest link.
Makes sense.
So
I think that's great branding.
No matter what you do, and I'm
pretty sure they do some branding marketing.
We finally called someone smarter than us to get involved in that, to really create the brand and the colors and all that kind of thing. But that strong, you're only as strong as your weakest link, really comes down to no matter how much technology you put into place, your people are the ones that are going to bring you down, right? So you can have
they're
the best
always
of the
the
best.
Weakest link, right?
Right. So you have to manage to that. And that's why insurance is really focused on what are you doing from cybersecurity awareness? Are you training your people? I think you heard that at the presentation. Talk to your people. Talk to them frequently. Let them know that these emails are coming out. They're getting more sophisticated. You have, phishing has been around for a while, but they're getting, they've got with AI, with the voice component, they got video, right? So it's all these new ways to get into your system. And so all RiskVersity has done is really looked at cyber as a very particular risk lens and doing the work around it. So that's what
one of your focuses.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. I appreciate the walkthrough. So how long ago did you guys start RiskVersity?
2015.
2015. Okay.
August of 15. Yes.
Yeah. So you're going on a decade. That's cool.
We're getting close. We're inching up that. It's like, well, I know you have that the first 5 years. Like if you pass that mark, you're like,
okay, we might make it.
Yeah, then you get you that 7 to 8, 9 year windows. That's the next wave, right? So if we can get beyond this and get to that 10-year mark,
can we pivot for whatever happened during this decade, right?
Absolutely.
That's really what it comes down to. Are you able to change? I went through a little bit of a change in my firm late last year, and so that was a good test, actually. Like, are you able to kind of change and pivot? Because you're going to have to again. It's just the nature of the business,
right? When you're small, it's a little bit easier to pivot, I think.
Sure,
right?
That's right. Every customer that comes in, you change your average, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let me talk about you a little bit as a founder. What's it done to you to start and own and run a company? Because I know what goes into that. You're managing cash flow and you're figuring out how to have employees and all the little variables, pay bills, collect from customers, win customers, there's a lot of little things, and it's hard to do all those. It's hard to do two things well, let alone all 200. You got to do well to run a small business. Maybe there's a couple dozen that are critical, right? What's the biggest change that's happened to you as a person since you became an entrepreneur?
Hair loss and gray hair.
Okay.
Right. I mean,
just like becoming a president.
Yeah. That's what happens, right?
You ever see those pictures, the president before their
age? Yes,
and then
absolutely.
After? Yeah.
So I mean, it's real, right? I mean, the burden on you personally, your family, right? Because this is how you live. No one else is paying your paycheck for you, right? If you work for a corporation, you might have a little window of time before your performance review shows up
Right.
for you to decide, like, yeah, you're not a good
Clock
fit,
out
right?
for a couple weeks mentally, and nobody can know. You could probably sneak around, and nobody will notice.
It's hard to do that as an entrepreneur, right? Particularly when you're on that growing trajectory and you're still in the early phases of your business. Like, you have to be on, and you're on all the time. So to your point, you're responsible for the sales component, and you hope that you have employees or partners that have a skill set there that they can take some of those things on. We've done a good job with our ownership group, and bringing folks into the organization who have those things that may not be our best every day, and let them run with that and lead it, and just we check in on it. So as a person, you kind of have your identity sometimes by the business that you have.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's rare that I go in the closet, I don't have very many clothes that doesn't have one of the brands
Really
on it, right? It's like, you wear a shirt that's unbranded, like, oh,
I was just
that
thinking
old
about
Tommy Hilfiger shirt. It's like from 2006. Is it still in style?
Dude, I was just thinking about that. I was thinking about, I saw somebody post something, I think on LinkedIn, about, I made a mistake in taking this call when I should have been, whatever, somebody was in the hospital or something. And I'm thinking, what I thought to that initially was, well, yeah, there's always a time to focus and just put other things aside. But also, you're always multiple things. There's a handful of things in your life that are always critical. And when you run a business, that's one of them. Like, my kids are always going to be on that short list. My wife and my finances, my health personally, or whatever, physically. But when you run a business and that's your livelihood and that's your means of paying your mortgage, for the next several months or whatever, that's always going to be on the list too. And so it's okay to work it in, right? So I saw that and I cringed a little bit. I'm like, man, like your kid can sit on your lap while you're running things, but you don't get to clock out at 5, right? Like, if something matters, maybe you do. I mean, different people have different work hygiene, right? Or whatever, but
ebbs and flows.
But I don't think there's, it struck me as like, I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily if it's urgent and you feel like it needs your attention and you're managing multiple things, you're spinning a couple of plates. It's kind of the nature of what we do when you're.
But you get flexibility also sometimes,
right?
That's right. And so it's a trade-off.
Oh,
right?
this person you're visiting in the hospital sleeping, I'm going to go take this call. Like, how could you not?
How could you not? Right? Yeah. So I think, personally, you have to try to find. I mean, it's the cliche of work-life balance. I mean, that doesn't really exist. It's an ebb and flow, right? There's never really a balance.
Work is part of my life. Right?
It's part of your life, right? Yeah. And so it's timing and being able to, when it's spring break or summertime.
That's right.
We can go because we do most of our stuff remotely. I can be out of the local area for 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
Out of the country. It doesn't matter where I am. I can schedule, let's not do in person, let's do virtual, right? So I can get up early, and work while I'm vacation where everybody else gets up and get things done and then go spend time with the family, right? If there's a concert or something else in the middle of the day, unless there's something emergent, you can make time.
Where I've seen it get messy is, I think sometimes as founders, we enjoy the flexibility. Like, I can be on, if I work a 6-hour day today, who cares? And if I put in a 2-hour phone call tomorrow, Saturday, who cares?
Right.
It doesn't matter to me. It's all just part of my life. Every day, Sunday, Monday, whatever. They're all the same.
Yep.
But that's not true for somebody who's on my payroll, right? Like, they need time to not think about my business.
Yes.
Right. As an owner, I have a different level of vested interest in it, mentally, psychologically, and whatever else. There is something healthy about when you're working for wages or you're working for compensation or whatever for somebody else. Ultimately, for somebody else's, highest benefit, it's fair to provide. And so I think I used to work for a founder. It was all hours, anytime, whatever. Just that's not. That's cool. You enjoy that freedom.
Yeah,
but I'm not enjoying it because now I'm on whatever random flexibility you're enjoying.
Compensation conversation.
That's right. And I was paid enough in that role, so I had no reason to complain, and I didn't. But I felt it.
You felt it.
I'm like, oh man, if I was an entry level employee here, I would not be taking this message right now. But anyway, so tell me about Tell me about your what's your relationship like with your team? Like how'd that come to be? How'd your team come to be?
Just over the years, right?
Okay.
Whether we were together in college or friends of friends.
Okay, so mostly people you knew.
Yeah,
that's cool.
The team is really around folks that we knew, and we were fine. Integrating the we know you. Let's do this thing together. Has not been an issue. So, but having that comfort with folks, I think when you're interviewing people you don't know, you're trusting a lot of things that you hope what your gut tells you is going to be accurate.
Dude, trust is. I've said this for a long, long time. When you employ people, it's all about trust, because you can be missing on 1,000 things, but if you can rely on what somebody says, you can go so much faster. And if you can understand and really connect with somebody, that also comes down to trust too, because you can't always understand. Communication is not always crystal clear between anybody.
Right.
But when there's a default presumption of goodwill,
exactly,
trust is huge, man.
It's huge. It's huge. And you have that when you know people and you've seen them work in other places, you see their work ethic, what they're about. You can start with that, and then it makes it much easier. I
find a good proxy for that to be when you don't have the benefit of being able to employ people you know or that you've worked with in the past, prioritizing kind of value alignment. Like, what are the things that matter most? We all value integrity or whatever. Everybody says that, but is it the most important differentiator? That's what I tend to look at. What are my company values? We tend to think about, like, what are the values that are most differentiating about us? It's not that one of ours is reliability. It's not that every other firm isn't reliable in some way, right? If yours is integrity, it's not that I'm not it's not
right. Yeah.
One of mine isn't integrity, but it doesn't mean I don't have integrity. It's the thing that's most differentiating, right? And so when you find those things to be in common between multiple parties, what I find is that they're kind of inspired and appreciate, and it's a fast track to trust.
Absolutely.
So that kind of, a lot of people just kind of dilute it when they say cultural alignment or whatever. Right. And they don't give a lot of real specificity to it.
Right. Yeah.
But I've got kind of a technique for getting real specific about that, and like discerning what an employee or a potential employee is. What are your work values? Right? Like, what are your kind of top 5 critical driving characteristics? But when you get to that point where you have to hire strangers, that's free advice. There you go.
Thank you.
It's tough, man.
I can call you, right?
It is tough out there. Well, hopefully,
the pool's kind of shallow from the workforce perspective, right? So you got to take some chances that you otherwise wouldn't. But
if you're trying to grow, you do. Ultimately, it's, if you're trying to grow personnel, different ways to grow. But yeah, it gets a little scary when the familiar, known, person on your Rolodex or whatever isn't there, and you've got to go out to the wild. It does get scary. A lot of risk.
Yeah. A lot of risk.
What are your driving values or principles? What matters to you personally?
So personally, great question.
Because you already answered. I already know that it's the same in your business because they're all integrated, right?
They're all integrated, right? I mean, I think really the being able to be, a bit vulnerable, right, is key. Now, I will go to bat for my team. When someone says that, something happened, I'm going to trust they did all that they could do. I'm going to show up, right? So that trust factor that is key for me. I think you said that. It's really a servant leader. Like, I really want to serve and be a value add to my people. So, and my customers. So I'm driving with that, right? What is that ethical approach? Were we doing the right thing for your client always? How do we add that value? How do we be a true partner in trying to figure out a solution? It's not always, I need to make the most money on this engagement, but how can we do this over time? And so for me, it's partnership really drives me. We ask that question when we're, talking to a prospect and we communicate while we ask, and what does partnership look like, to you? We may not always get it right when we communicate what we thought we heard, but we want to have a conversation to align where we're trying to go, so that we can both get what we need. Because the worst part is when one side is always, at some point in time, there's going to be a come to Jesus conversation of, you've been overbilling us. We get no value out of that, right?
Some expectations not going to be met, right, from one party or the
so
other.
We understand expectations. So anything in life, for me, from a driving force is, you want to do good work. When I walk away from the room, I want someone to say, they're good people. Laurence is a good person. Did something go sideways? It did, but they corrected the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that trust, that foundational level. He's a good person.
Right. It's not malicious. It's not incompetence.
Best interests in heart. It just sometimes things you don't process the information. You have all the information. You made a decision on the fly. You're walking in the hallway. Someone says, "Hey, can we do this?" Like, that sounds good. Go ahead and do it. Right. It wasn't ill will, but just may not have landed appropriately. Right. And so, for me, when I'm not in the room, that someone is willing to refer me, to talk good about me when I'm not in the room, when I'm in the room. Right. So that personal brand is huge, that people just would say he's a good person.
Let me ask you something about that. The partnership, whatever.
Yeah.
Have you ever, or I guess you can't know for sure, but have you ever got the feeling that you lost a customer because you told them the truth and they just it didn't resonate with them the right way or whatever? You feel like you've,
yes.
Can you think of a time when that's happened?
Yes. It's happened on more than one occasion.
Have you ever had one of them come back to you?
Not yet.
No.
But I'm okay when that happens, right? Because sometimes you have to tell folks it's, when your wife says, "Do I look good in this dress?" It's like, do I lie or tell the truth?
Right.
Or somewhere in the middle, right? And sometimes you say
right, she's walking out the door with keys in the hand to an event that doesn't matter. You look great, man.
You look great, right? So
is it off to a photo shoot for a professional webpage or whatever? Hold on, let's try the green dress.
Exactly, right? So sometimes there's these variables that you have to kind of process quickly. But I feel like if you told them what you think was the right thing, again, in partnership, but being honest and what's in the best interest for them, sometimes it doesn't land well. Maybe you didn't communicate it appropriately. But if I've done what I thought was right, I don't have any heartburn over losing that client. My checkup is, when you text them, they still respond. And if they do, and you still can go grab dinner and do other things, then you feel like, at least from a foundational perspective, that the relationship is still good. They like what you had to say and they want to move somewhere else. And sometimes it's over, they don't see the value the same way that you do, just because they don't understand that aspect of something. And sometimes people just don't have the same ability to be on that same level to see the future. So you just kind of wait for that thing to happen to them.
Or
you don't want it to happen.
The unique things about what you do aren't that valuable to them. And that's the things I charge a premium for.
Exactly.
But if you don't appreciate those things, then why would you pay for them?
Right. So I think that's kind of where you see it happen most often. I can't think of any client that we've lost that wouldn't come back at some point when they saw this is what they were talking about. Now to the value, let's go back. So that it hasn't been very many, and we're short of a decade still, so we haven't lost very many, and the ones that we lost has been more recent. And so most of that's been around, I think, has been trying to align the value with budget constraints, right? The economy is, I don't know if the economy is good or if it's bad. I'm in the airport. There's plenty of people.
Don't ask me about the economy. This is my attitude toward the economy. My economy is great. And I don't pay that much attention to the economy. I do. I read about it a little bit.
Right. But
there are aspects of it that aren't great. Aspects like the employment economy. Employment's strong. There's high demand, low supply of people. There are a lot of people that have been asking me this, why is it so hard to get a job? Why is it so hard to get? There's a couple of places where the demand has shrunk. Most of it has gone up, and a lot of people are not accepting that reality. Pivot a little bit, get engaged in other spaces that are adjacent or whatever. You need to do that sometimes. But on the employment side, the economy's great. Cost of capital. Anyway, but I don't pay that much. I don't pay that much attention to the larger economy. I pay attention to the, couple hundred prospects that I'm communicating with over whatever period, because those are the ones who create my economy. Right. And
right. You're right.
That's what buys my kids shoes.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I don't care about the bank in California. Anyway, I do indirectly, but
so my from a personal perspective, kind of just wrap up the question. What drives me only in business, but just personally, I like to be involved in things that are focused on empowering people.
Okay.
Right? So that's the education component. So if I'm involved in nonprofits, there's an education component, right? Or a social service to make people better than, or get them on their feet to realize their best self, right? So that's a driving force for me.
Where does that come
right?
from? What's your backstory?
I think
people don't usually get inspired by those kind of things unless there's something. Right?
So yeah, you make me like get emotional here for a moment. So my
let me get the tissues. Hold on a second.
on my mom's side.
I have shed a tear in this room,
right?
So
it happens. Okay,
you won't be the first.
I'll look for that podcast.
No, it's buried.
Okay, it's buried deep in there. Yeah. That's what got cut out. So my grandmother was a very religious person.
Okay.
One, so spiritual. So as vacation Bible school in the summertime. It's like,
okay,
why are we going to the church for vacation Bible school with no air conditioning and somewhere all my friends are out playing baseball, right? It was really to give you this foundation of the spiritual component to kind of have that North Star, if you will.
Okay.
Well, but she was also an educator, right? And so education was important to her, that if you don't have the ability to absorb information and be an educated person to solve problems, problematic. Right. So I think that's what really drove me to be aligned with providing opportunities and helping empower people to be their best self. Right.
Yeah.
And then it's access, right? How can in my network provide access that I've been privileged to have?
Dude, that's such a big deal.
To give that to other people. So I tell people, when I meet you, if in our initial conversation, I can, perceive you're a good person to have that trust, my network is your network.
Right.
Right. So if you see someone on my LinkedIn or Facebook, whatever the case may be, you want an introduction, I'll give that. Now, I have an asterisk next to that is, if I don't understand your work product, I've never worked with you, I can't vouch for
doesn't
what
come
you can
with
deliver.
a free endorsement without validation, right?
But I can say, I know this person, a good person, at least worth having a conversation with them. Happy to do that, right? Because if people have done that for me. So if I can extend that to other people to give them access, that's
I think, what, LJ, that's a big deal to me, man, because I grew up in a, I don't know if my mom's listening to this, she wouldn't want me to call us poor, but we were rich in a lot of ways, you know what I mean? Rich in love and influence, but, I had the free lunch and we had
I had a little red token.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah.
My name was a list. We had to go in on a different line. It was horrible. Anyway.
Put on the spot, right? Everybody
I wore my uncle's hand-me-down shoes and whatever else, right? So, but what's crazy is, I remember my first job was actually some state subsidized thing. I think it was called the MAC project or MAC program or something. They more or less just gave you a job and then paid for it. And so that was life-changing to me because I didn't know I didn't feel confident I didn't have connections. My parents, like my kids, like, hey, you want to do an internship in my company or whatever? Like they had an insider treatment because I had found some success by the time they were growing up. And I didn't have that. So that access, connection, and it's such a big part of people's success is like who you are connected to. 100%. Like I ran a large enterprise HR department and I saw how many of hey, grab that person's resume. Oh, all the other ones go away. It's crazy how much time people spend on making their resume matchy, perfect. And then, Phil's nephew, niece, Sue, he's like, hey, can you make sure Sue gets, seen by Deborah over there? I talked to her about her. And it's crazy amount of that. It's like, for the most critical roles, it's almost all of that. It's most of that, yes, right? 100%, yeah. So access is a huge deal because this whole idea of like everybody getting a fair shake, they don't, because people are operating on trust when it comes to the biggest decisions, the most impactful opportunities. It's created by like a familiarity. You use that familiarity to your advantage, and you'd be crazy not to. People are crazy not to. So it's a huge disadvantage to people who are not connected to or trusted by influential people.
Right.
I caught a couple breaks, and I won't stop looking back and appreciating those things, and I won't stop looking for potential in people that need those, same breaks. It's a big deal. I'm glad you said that. Yeah. It's cool. It's a driving principle for me too.
Well, good. That's why we like each other right from the start, right?
I think so, but I like that you called it access. That's really what it is, connectedness or whatever you want to call it. Well, what's next for you, man? You're going on a decade now. What are you trying to accomplish personally or in your business over the next year or so?
Well, only one of them is close to a decade, right? So I have a new baby, Cybershore, right? So that's like it's the next kid in the, in the litter, if you will.
Okay.
to get that to on its
So
trajectory.
when does CyberSure start?
March of 21. So we just hit the 3-year mark last month. So
Cool.
it's where we got a good run rate. We've got some good clients on the books. It's now how do we really
I confused the two. I apologize.
No, it's fine. How do you then take that and flow it forward? RiskVersity has a much longer track record in history, and we've got folks who call us because they know that we're out there to do things.
Okay.
It's getting cyber sort of that same point so that I can really change other people's lives. So how do I, with my position, find people with talent, whether they're employees or future owners in our entities, to bring them into the fold to provide opportunity, right? If they're in a corporate role that they enjoy but they aren't being fulfilled with they could be, is what we do a better fit. We don't plan to be a 25, 30, 40 person outfit. We want to be 10 or less. That's the focus.
I love that powerful squad.
Just to be the power.
And everybody's kids, right? Like everybody's interests and hobbies. Right?
When I was at the CPA firm, in the basement, we knew everybody knew everything. As that started to grow, that change, and it's still a great group of folks.
But it's very different.
It's different. You just can't know everybody the same way. You have multiple offices. You can't get around enough to know everybody. And so I want to keep it. We have folks in Nashville, we have folks in Charlotte, we have folks in Greensboro, but we know we're on Teams 3, 4, 5 times a day. We're instant message. Then I get a text message on Teams and an email saying, or the group communicate, because we are that close to one another, and I don't want to lose that. I think it's a value for us to have that connectivity.
Well, let me give you one more question, 2-parter.
Okay.
So it's really 2, but I'm cheating. I'm going to sneak them both in, man. All right. So I always like to end on this one. What's going to get in your way from accomplishing your goals over the next year or two? What's the biggest threat to you? You might appreciate that I ask a risk-based question. Yeah. What's your big risk over the next year or two? And part 2, what are you going to do about it?
In both businesses, I think that people continue to find a way to not do what's right. And what I mean by that is, when you have whatever this economy is or isn't doing, folks are looking for ways to cut cost. And when you're looking to cut costs, sometimes the thought process doesn't happen to really look at the risk component of that. And so you start cutting things like that we do. If insurance costs are going up, so you're paying more there, that's included in what we do from a risk perspective. And so we have contracts that say we have to have insurance. So we're going to focus on insurance versus how do we mitigate our risk, right? And if you can't really communicate the total cost of risk, that's going to be both in the cyber side and the overall risk management side. I think that's going to be that obstacle holistically. The other part is, when you're a certified minority owned business, the attack, if you will, on DEI, or the kind of attack against the woke thing, if you will, sometimes is also getting in the way a bit, where folks are pulling back on supplier diversity, which is sometimes the only way that we can get in the door of some places, because as we talked about, the trust factor, and
there's a lot of contempt. If your friends in just for the other, it's different. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So if your friends know the person, you can get in and get a bid and a project because they know someone. So you're not really open to the landscape to really, look for the scrappy, innovative, groups that are going to come in and do something very, very different. So I think that's the other obstacle that's out there. But a lot of research is saying that, CEOs and other leaders are seeing beyond this attack on what DEI really means, and looking at the business model that says we have to do these things. It's the right thing to do. We can call it whatever you want to call it, but providing seats at the table with different mindsets, right? Those of us who had free or reduced lunch, that life experience brings something different to the table versus someone who never had to worry about
100%
what I'm going to eat tomorrow.
That and 100 others.
Right. So I think, having that doesn't always come based on, how you look, but understanding your team has a diverse background, a lot of different ways, right? So people would have, other disabilities. If your clientele and your customers used to focus on that, having someone with that mindset or that knowledge base is key to have on your team, right? So really understanding your stakeholders and your is the bigger issue, right? So if all of your customers look like you, diversity doesn't matter. If you're selling to someone and all your customers do exactly what you do when they do it, there's no reason to have diversity. But if your stakeholders, your customer base doesn't look like you, and you're trying to grow,
or you don't want them to be,
or you want so
one dimensional, right?
So then you have to look at how do we then effectively communicate, advertise to have services and products that speak to that demographic, male, female, young, old, right? So diversity means a lot of things. It's not just a black and white issue. Diversity is much beyond that, right? So but also understanding backgrounds and philosophies and how people process information. All those things in a decision room at a management table or board table allows the organization to be better. You said it earlier, it impacts the bottom line.
Yeah.
The greatest studies will show you that the diversity of thought and diversity in your C-suite will benefit your bottom line.
Yeah.
There's no question. Period. So if we get that through, I feel like we can get there. So we have a plan, right? We're a diverse owned company. Do we lead with that always? No, we do really good work.
It resonates
right?
sometimes, and
sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And we work in some really rural counties in the South that you're almost scared to drive through. I have tinted windows for a reason, right? To make sure, if anybody's profiling me, I can make it through successfully. But when you do really good work and you're a good human being and you're personable and you can relate that, hey, we both have blood running through our veins. Our heartbeat's kind of the same way. Might be faster than yours, but we're people, right? We're human beings. And if you can relate there and we can deliver on and solve your problems, that's where we focus, right? Our goal is to be professional problem solvers. You have a problem, I want to have a direct solution, or at least I know someone who can solve your problem.
It's been a great conversation, man.
It has been. Thank you.
I'm really grateful for you coming out.
I didn't know where this was going to go, but
generally
here we are,
just like this, all over the place. Good chat, man. I wanted to make it an hour or two longer, but maybe we'll do it another time.
Yeah,
all right,
absolutely. We'll
good
come
chat.
back.
Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.